The first time I unfolded this map, my own sister laughed so hard she cried, and my father walked out of the house like he'd been struck. I can still hear it, this thin, tired paper arguing with my fingers as if it didn't want to be seen again. I'm telling you tonight because I don't have the luxury of someday anymore. Because this map, creased, coffee-stained, and drawn in my daddy's careful pencil, points to a piece of land my family spent a lifetime pretending was a bedtime story. And before you ask, yes. We tried to forget it. We tried to laugh it off, to call it foolish, to tuck it behind old photographs and Christmas ribbons. But it has been waiting for me, the way some truths do, quietly, patiently, and heavier every year. So here is my promise to you, right now, in the first breath of this story. I will show you what my grandma's lost map led to, why no one believed the land was ours, how that disbelief split our family down the middle, and what happened when the next generation finally chose to go looking. The map lives in an old tin recipe box, the kind that used to sit on top of the fridge. Mine smells like cinnamon, dust, and metal. Inside it, beneath yellowed index cards and a rusted measuring spoon, was this folded square of paper, soft at the edges like it had been worried by 1,000 secret touches. One corner is stained brown where coffee once spilled, and the stain looks like a small continent. The lines are faint in places, darker in others, where my daddy pressed too hard, like he was trying to make the land obey him. You ever hold something and feel the room change? Like the air gets tighter, and even the clock gets quieter? Because that's what happened the day I found it again. It was a Tuesday, ordinary as dishwater. My knees were sore, my house was too silent, and I was looking for a quilt pattern I'd sworn I'd kept. I dragged the trunk out from the closet, the old cedar one that leaves the smell of forests on your hands, and I popped the latch. And there it was. The recipe box. The map. Waiting. But the reason I finally stopped hiding it wasn't just age or aching joints. It was a letter. The envelope came with stiff, official paper inside. Notice of easement survey, it said, in those cold printed words that pretend they're not about people's lives. It listed a parcel number, a road expansion, and a location name that made my throat close. River Bend Orchard Tract. River Bend. The name from the map. The name my family trained itself to spit like a joke. And the letter wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my father, full name, middle initial and all, followed by 2 words that hit like a gavel. Or estate. How do you ignore something like that? How do you keep calling it imaginary when the county prints it in ink? I set that letter on the kitchen table and stared at it until the light shifted. Then I opened the tin box and let the map breathe for the first time in years. My granddaughter, Claire, was the one who walked in. She stopped when she saw my hands shaking, not from fear, exactly. From memory. "Grandma," she said, soft, "what is that?" And I had a choice. Tell her the polished version. The safe version. The one where we are the kind of family that never fought over land, never stopped speaking, never lost a piece of itself to a rumor. Or tell her the truth. "Sit down, honey," I said, and I heard my own mother's voice come out of me. Because this is the map to the land no one believed in. And the moment I said it, I knew there was no folding it back up the same way. I was 9 the first time I heard the land spoken about like it was a person. Not property. Not acres. Not money. A person. The orchard, my mother would whisper, like she didn't want the walls to learn the word. Down by the river bend. It wasn't bedtime story talk. It was low-voice talk, the kind adults use when they're trying to keep children from carrying the weight. But children are born little thieves of truth. We steal it anyway. I remember the kitchen in that old house, linoleum curling at the corners, a calendar with a red barn on it, and my daddy standing at the table with a pencil behind his ear. My mother was washing dishes too hard, as if scrubbing could fix what worry had done. Outside, my uncles argued on the porch in that half-muffled way, where you can't catch the words, but you can catch the anger. I edged closer and saw my daddy lay a sheet of paper flat. He drew a line and said, almost to himself, "The river curves like this." Then he added a small square and a dot. That's the big sycamore. It's our marker. I didn't understand why a tree could matter so much. But I understood the feeling in the room, hope, trying not to be noticed. My mother leaned in and pointed with a wet fingertip. Your father said it's just past the stone fence, she murmured. He said the apples were the sweetest he ever tasted. My grandfather, my daddy's daddy, had worked for a man named Mr. Larkin before I was born. That's the name that comes up later, so hold on to it. Mr. Larkin owned an orchard down by the river bend, and my grandpa was the one who fixed the fence lines, pruned the trees, kept thieves away at night. My grandpa didn't have money, but he had hands that could make land behave. One winter, so the story went, Mr. Larkin got sick. And when a man gets sick, he starts thinking about who remembers him kindly. Mr. Larkin wrote something out. Not a fancy deed. Not a lawyer paper with ribbons. Just a handwritten agreement, ink on a page, promising my grandpa a small tract of the orchard in exchange for years of work and a loan my grandpa had scraped together. It was supposed to be the start of something. A foothold. A future. My mother used to say, your grandpa believed in that orchard the way some folks believe in heaven. But believing didn't make it easy. Because when Mr. Larkin died, the orchard didn't pass gently into grateful hands. It became a fight. A nephew came forward. A widow's cousin. Somebody with a sharper suit and a better grip on paperwork. And suddenly my grandpa's agreement was misplaced, unofficial, not worth the ink. My grandpa kept his copy. Or so he said. He tucked it away like a prayer. And my daddy, young, stubborn, desperate, drew this map so the land couldn't disappear just because someone wanted it to. But here's what I need you to understand, the map wasn't just directions. It was an argument waiting to happen. Have you ever watched a family turn hope into a weapon? The first big argument came in the summer, when the heat makes everyone meaner. We were eating supper, beans, cornbread, sliced tomatoes, when my Uncle Ray slammed his glass down hard enough to jump. I'm not wasting another dollar chasing a fairy tale, he said. My daddy's jaw tightened. It's not a fairy tale. I've walked it. I've stood by that sycamore. Uncle Ray laughed, sharp as broken dishware. Then bring home an apple and I'll believe you. My mother didn't look up from her plate. She just pressed her fork into the cornbread like she wanted to pin the whole conversation down. My daddy stood and went to the drawer where he kept the paper, the map, and he set it on the table between them. And the room changed. Because that map didn't look like much to anyone else. A few lines, a river curve, a tree, a fence. But to my daddy, it was proof he hadn't been born to lose. Uncle Ray pushed it back with 2 fingers, like it might dirty him. You're going to bankrupt us over pencil marks. My daddy's voice went low. No. I'm going to stop letting people take what's ours. And that's when my aunt, my mother's sister, said the sentence that lit the match. Or maybe it was never ours to begin with. Silence fell so hard I could hear a fly buzz at the window. My mother's face went pale, and my daddy stared at her like she'd betrayed her own blood. That night, I saw my mother crying at the sink, shoulders shaking but quiet, like she didn't feel allowed to make sound. And my daddy sat at the table with the map, tracing the river line again and again as if he could wear a path into certainty. What do you do when the people you love become the gatekeepers of your dream? That was just the beginning. Because the day the map truly divided us, came years later, after a funeral. My grandfather died in late October, when the trees were stripped and honest. The kind of day where the wind feels like it knows something you don't. After the burial, we all returned to my uncle's house. Too many casseroles, too much coffee, not enough air. That's when the adults started talking about money in that careful, brittle way. There were bills. There was a mortgage. There was a truck that needed repairs. And there was my grandpa's agreement, which half the family believed was locked somewhere safe, and half the family believed was as real as smoke. My daddy stood up in that crowded living room and said, he wanted us to have the orchard. He held up the map, and I swear the paper looked smaller in his hands than it ever had before. Uncle Ray shook his head. He wanted us to survive. And you're talking about spending what little we have on a lawyer. My aunt crossed her arms. Let it go. The orchard is gone. It was never ours. My daddy's voice cracked. It's not gone because a man signed a paper. It's gone because we keep choosing to walk away. And then, God forgive us, we began saying the ugliest versions of ourselves out loud. Uncle Ray called my daddy delusional. My daddy called Uncle Ray coward. My aunt said my mother was dragging the family into embarrassment. My mother finally snapped and said, at least he's trying to give our children more than fear. The map sat on the coffee table like a small animal caught in a trap. And then my cousin, trying to help, trying to end it, reached for it and said, give it here. I'll toss it. Problem solved. My daddy lunged forward. Chairs scraped. Coffee sloshed. In the commotion, the map tore at one of the folds. Just a small rip. But it sounded like something bigger breaking. I watched my mother's face when she saw that tear. It wasn't anger. It was grief, pure and startled, like she'd just realized the argument wasn't about land anymore. And I did the only thing a teenage girl could think to do. I took the map. Not with permission. Not with a grand announcement. I slipped it off the table when nobody was looking and folded it against my chest like it could hear my heart. Because I knew, somehow I knew, if it stayed in that room another minute, it would be burned, trashed, or turned into a permanent wound. So I hid it. And the hiding did not heal us. It just froze the fight in time. That was the day the family split into two kinds of people, the ones who could not stop believing, and the ones who could not afford to. My daddy stopped speaking to Uncle Ray for 3 full years. 3 years of birthdays missed, holidays divided, grandchildren passed like messages between enemy lines. At Thanksgiving, there would be 2 tables in 2 houses, 20 minutes apart, and nobody would say why. But everyone knew. Have you ever tasted food that had silence baked into it? The years that followed weren't dramatic in the way movies are. They were worse. They were ordinary. A Christmas where someone handed my daddy a sweater and said, too brightly, hope it's not from the orchard. A laugh followed, thin, forced, and my daddy's eyes went flat. A summer when the car broke down and my mother counted bills at the table, and Uncle Ray muttered, if that land was real, we wouldn't be begging. Then he looked at me and said, don't get ideas. I would nod, because nodding is what you do when you're young and you want peace. But inside, something stubborn took root. At night, when the house was asleep, I'd open the tin box and unfold the map on my bed. I'd smooth it with my palm and trace that river bend until my fingertip warmed the paper. Sometimes I'd whisper, are you real, to a drawing. And then I'd feel foolish and fold it away fast, as if embarrassment could be caught. Some dreams don't die, people just stop saying them aloud. Years passed. I married. I moved 2 counties over. I had children and then grandchildren, and I learned how life fills up with ordinary emergencies, school lunches, doctor visits, leaky roofs. And still, that map stayed with me. Not because I was greedy. Not because I wanted to win. But because I hated what it had done to us without ever proving itself one way or another. The orchard became a family ghost. At reunions, someone would inevitably say, remember Dad and his map, and everybody would laugh too loudly. Or they would go quiet and change the subject like they'd stepped on a grave. My father grew older, and his anger cooled into something sadder. He stopped bringing it up, not because he stopped believing, but because he got tired of bleeding in public. One night, when I was in my 30s, I found him on the porch staring at the dark. I sat beside him and he didn't look at me, just said, if I'm wrong, then I wasted my life being stubborn. And if I'm right, then I wasted my life anyway. How do you answer your father when he says something like that? I didn't. I just held his hand until the porch light buzzed and the moths gave up. Then, time did what time always does. It took people. My mother went first. Then my uncle. Then, eventually, my father. When we cleaned out his house, my cousins found boxes of papers and tossed most of them without reading, because grief makes you impatient. I didn't stop them. I just kept the map hidden in my own home, in my own tin box, like a stubborn ember. And I told myself, over and over, it doesn't matter. It's too late. Leave it alone. Until the letter came. Back in my kitchen, in the present, Claire stared at the map with her eyebrows pulled together. She's the kind of young woman who reads instructions before she builds something. The kind who doesn't accept, because I said so, as an answer. She said, "Grandma, why would the county send this to Grandpa if it wasn't real?" And my throat tightened, because that was the question nobody asked when it mattered. I slid the notice toward her. "Read the parcel number," I told her. Claire took out her phone, of course she did, and typed with quick, sure thumbs. A few seconds later, the light from the screen made her face look pale and young. "Okay," she said slowly. "There's a parcel map online. It's labeled River Bend Orchard Tract." My hands gripped the edge of the table. And it lists an old owner name," she said. "Larkin." The kitchen felt suddenly too small for my lungs. Claire zoomed in and turned the screen toward me. Lines. Boundaries. A blue curve for the river. And there, just where my daddy's pencil had put it, was a bend so familiar it made my eyes sting. Could a man be right for 60 years and still lose? Claire looked up. "Grandma," she said, "careful, what are you asking me to do?" I didn't say, "Find it and prove them all wrong." That would have been the old anger talking. I said, "I'm asking you to come with me. Just to stand where this says we could stand." She hesitated. Not because she didn't believe me, because belief is expensive. "Is it dangerous?" she asked, half joking, but her eyes were serious. "Only if the past can swing its fists," I told her. "And honey, it can." We didn't tell the whole family at first. That's the truth. Because families don't just argue about land. They argue about what the land means. And I didn't know if I had the strength to reopen every old wound just to be told, one more time, that I was holding a foolish piece of paper. So Claire and I made a plan like we were planning a small robbery, quietly, carefully, with snacks packed and nerves tucked under politeness. We left early, before the sun had fully decided to show up. The map sat on my lap, and every bump in the road made it flutter like it was nervous too. Claire drove. I navigated the old way, by memory, by river smell, by the shape of hills. Every few miles I'd glance down and match pencil lines to real turns, like trying to translate a language I used to speak. "Did Grandpa ever come back here?" Claire asked. "Not after the fight," I admitted. "He said if he couldn't bring the family with him, he didn't want to go alone." Claire was quiet for a long stretch. Then she asked, "Do you think he regretted that?" I watched the roadside trees blur past. "I think he regretted everything that cost him his brother," I said. "But I don't think he regretted believing." About an hour in, the landscape changed. The hills opened up, and the air smelled damp, like river stones. A memory stirred, apples in a wooden crate, sharp and sweet. Then we saw it. A new sign, bright and cheerful, planted in the ground like it owned the place. River Bend Meadows, homes from the low 300s. My heart sank so fast it felt like stepping off a curb that isn't there. Claire glanced at me. "Grandma." "Keep going," I said, though my voice came out thinner than I wanted. Because of course the world doesn't stay still just because a family argued. Of course land changes hands, grows houses, grows fences. But the rivers don't care about paperwork. Rivers keep their own records. We turned onto a narrower road, and gravel snapped under the tires like knuckles cracking. The map said there would be an old stone fence. We passed a row of mailboxes, new, shiny. Then, behind them, half hidden by vines, I saw stones stacked irregularly, lichen-covered, old as stubbornness. "There," I whispered. Claire slowed the car. The fence line ran along the edge of a field, and beyond it, the land dipped toward the river, just as the map promised. My mouth went dry. Was this the place? Or was my mind forcing a match because it wanted to? We parked on the shoulder. Claire helped me out because my knees don't enjoy surprises. The wind off the river smelled like wet bark and cold sun. I held the map in both hands. My fingers found the torn fold. And for a moment, I saw my father's face the day it ripped, like someone had torn him too. We walked along the stone fence until we reached a gap where the rocks had been pushed aside and replaced with a gate. A private property sign hung there, polite but firm. Claire looked at me. Do we knock? My throat worked. We knock, I said. We followed a driveway that used to be dirt, now paved. At the end stood a modest house with flowerpots and a wind chime that clinked in a slow, patient rhythm. A man in his 60s opened the door, wiping his hands on a towel. He looked from Claire to me to the paper in my hands. Yes, he said, cautious but not unkind. I held up the map like an offering. I'm sorry to bother you, I said. My name is Evelyn. This belonged to my father. We're trying to find a place that used to be called River Bend Orchard. The man's eyes flicked down to the river curve and the little dot by the square. He went still. You got that from the Miller family, he said. Not a question. My skin prickled. Yes, I whispered. How do you know that name? He looked over his shoulder, then stepped outside and pulled the door mostly shut behind him, as if the house didn't need to hear. My granddad bought this tract from the Larkin estate, he said. A long time ago. And there was talk. What kind of talk? Claire asked, her voice tight. He sighed through his nose. That the orchard wasn't cleanly sold the first time. That someone worked it for years and got promised a piece, but it never made it into the official deed. People said it was a handshake and a scrap of paper. No lawyer. No courthouse stamp. My knees felt suddenly unsure. Claire touched my elbow. The man looked at the map again. Where did you get this? He asked softly, almost respectfully now. I took it, I admitted. During a fight. I hid it because I thought it might save us. He didn't judge. He just nodded like he understood how families do damage while trying to love each other. Then he said, if you want, I can show you something. He led us down a path behind the house where the grass grew tall near the slope. The river flashed through trees like a moving sheet of metal. We reached a section of ground where the earth rose slightly. Right here, he said, and pointed. At first, I didn't see it. Then I did. Half buried, moss-covered, was a stone, bigger than a football, smaller than a suitcase, with a faint marking carved into it. A square. And beside it, a single notch. My daddy's little square. My daddy's dot. The world tilted. Not dizzy, just rearranged. I knelt as best I could and put my palm on that stone. It was cold and solid and indifferent to our suffering. Claire whispered, Grandma, you were right. And you'd think that would feel like victory. But what I felt was grief. Heavy and clean. Because being right doesn't rewind a life. Winning late still feels like losing people on the way. I sat back on my heels, eyes burning. My father would've, I started, and couldn't finish. The man cleared his throat. There's more, he said. The county's been surveying because they're widening the road. They'll pay for easements. But ownership, that's a different thing. Of course it was. Claire asked, careful, is there any chance at all, that the Miller family still has a claim? The man shook his head slowly. Not after this many decades, he said. Not without a recorded deed. I'm sorry. There it was. The same old sentence, in a new mouth. I closed my eyes and let it land. And then something surprising happened inside me. I wasn't angry at him. I wasn't even angry at Mr. Larkin anymore, whoever he truly was at the end. I was angry at time. At pride. At the way my family used a maybe-land to justify real cruelty. Claire crouched beside me. "What do you want to do now?" she asked. That question, simple, present tense, was the first kind thing anyone had asked about the orchard in my whole life. I looked at the river, sliding past like it had somewhere better to be. I looked at the slope where apple trees might have stood, long gone or cut down. And I realized the land wasn't the only thing nobody believed in. They didn't believe in my father's memory. They didn't believe in my grandfather's work. They didn't believe in the idea that our family story could include something other than loss. So I said, "I want to stand here for a minute. And then I want to bring something home that can't be laughed away." The man nodded. He went back up the path and returned with a small paper bag from his kitchen. "For some soil," he said quietly. "If you want it." Claire held the bag while I scooped a handful of earth near the stone. The dirt was dark and rich and smelled like rain remembered. I folded the top of the bag like it was precious. Then I did one more thing. I unfolded my daddy's map and laid it gently against the stone so the pencil marks and the carved marks lined up, paper to earth, imagination to proof. Claire took a picture. Not for social media. For history. And as the wind moved through the trees, I imagined my father finally exhaling. On the drive home, Claire said, "Are you going to tell Uncle Ray's kids?" My stomach tightened at the name. Old reflex. Old bruise. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to toss the proof on the table and say, "Look. Look what you did." Claire kept her eyes on the road. "And the other part?" "The other part," I said slowly, "just wants to stop the bleeding. Because here's the truth you don't learn until you've buried enough people: being right is not the same as being at peace." When we got home, I called my cousin first, the one who'd reached for the map all those years ago. My voice shook as I said, "I found it." "What?" she asked. "The orchard," I said. "It was real. And I have something to show you." There was a long pause, and then I heard her swallow. "Oh, Ev," she said, and her voice sounded like an old apology. A week later, we had a small gathering, just coffee and pie, nothing fancy, because big ceremonies make people defensive. I set the map on the table. I set the photo beside it. And I set the bag of soil down like a quiet witness. No one laughed. My cousin touched the torn fold and whispered, "I remember that day." She looked at me with wet eyes. "I'm sorry." And just like that, the orchard became what it should have been all along, not a weapon, but a story. Did it fix everything? No. Some people are gone, and some apologies arrive too late to be useful. But it softened something. It turned the ghost into a photograph. Claire asked me later, "Do you wish you'd brought it out sooner?" I thought about my father's porch silence. My mother crying at the sink. The years of 2 Thanksgiving tables. And I said, I wish we had believed each other sooner. The land was never the hardest part. Now the map sits somewhere different. Not hidden. It's framed, but not like a trophy. Like a reminder. The tear is still there, because I want the next generation to see what a family fight can do to paper, and to people. Sometimes Claire brings her friends over, and she'll point and say, "My great-grandpa drew this." And I'll hear pride in her voice, the gentle kind that doesn't need to hurt anyone. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I touch the frame and whisper, "You were real." Not because the land needs to hear it. Because I do. If this story made you think of your own family, their secrets, their fights, the heirlooms tucked away, please tap like. It helps more people find this kind of slow, honest storytelling here on Dust of Old Days. And if you want more grandmother-style nostalgic family stories, mystery-filled heirlooms, old letters, forgotten places, subscribe and stay with us. Because you never know what truth is folded up in a box you haven't opened yet. And if you're still holding a map of your own, something you've been afraid to bring into the light, Maybe this is your sign to unfold it gently. Not to win. Just to finally stop wondering.